So, first of all, I want to ask you guys, who has ever tried virtual reality? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great. So maybe half of the people, right? And what have you tried? What was your experience? Let's make it interactive. Is there like a microphone here for the people? Yeah. So what have you tried?
I have seen through the headset that you can try it now.
Yeah.
Yes. 360 video.
360 video.
Yeah.
Cool, cool. Has anyone tried an Oculus Rift here? You tried it. The new one or the old one?
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, okay. What, did you see the pixels?
Yeah, well, it was like an F1 simulation, the roller coaster one.
Okay.
But you didn't actually play, which is like more like a video.
Have anyone tried Htc Vive? The one where you have the hand controllers and can walk around? One guy, great. Yeah? Awesome, okay. So I guess I want to start this by showing VR to somebody who has never seen it before. So can I have one volunteer who has never tried VR to come in and try it? Just one person here.
Come on, guys, you need to be brave.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll make it so everybody can try it. I want you all to leave this room today knowing how to start making your virtual reality apps, and at least try it this once. So I'm gonna show you how to use this. I'm gonna show it to everyone so you can swap later and you don't have to listen to me mumble. So there's this thing on the top here that lets you focus the view, and here's the controller, so you can tap to launch things. So I'm gonna put on the app now that we built, and it shows a painting of one of the Lithuanian painters, and you can be inside the painting.
Okay.
So this is a non-profit project we built for a local museum, and all you have to do now is put this on and then control this so you can see well. And yeah. So I like doing this live because I think the best way to experience VR is to try it. The second best way is to see somebody else try it, because it always elicits some emotions, and you see people, expressing their feelings, having what's called the Oculus face, when your mouth just opens and you go, ah. That's the technical term, an Oculus face. So I guess you're seeing things now.
Yeah, I'm seeing clouds.
What are you seeing? Clouds. So look around, there's stuff all around you.
Also, I can move in.
Yeah, you can. It's not scary, it's actually just an island flying towards her. So what she's trying is a mobile version of VR, and today I want to talk about what different versions of VR exist and how you can make content for it. Are there any developers in the room? 1, 2, 3, 4. So, okay, five is developers, and everybody else, are you sort of design or business or just a little bit of everything? Is a little bit of everything, I guess. So I'm gonna try and make this not too technical. So and then if you have technical questions, you can ask me later, and I'll hopefully be able to help you. So yeah. So first of all, I want to talk about the current state of VR. So I think this picture represents the current state of virtual reality very well. It's like an old TV. And one day we'll look back at these headsets and we'll think of them the same thing we think about this old TV. We'll think this was ridiculous. And I think things are moving so fast and changing so quickly that even 2 years from now, we'll look at this and think this was simple. So you can split VR into two categories. There's mobile VR and there is a desktop VR. So mobile VR has two most famous headsets. So one is the one I'm using here, which is made by Samsung, called Samsung Gear VR. Sadly, it only works with Samsung phones. And the other one is Google Cardboard, the one you probably have seen around. It's basically a cardboard fold-out with two lenses, and the phone does all the work. In this case, the phone still does most of the work, but you have external sensors in here. So you have the control sensors, you have the inertial measurement unit sensor, which helps you move and locate the head better, and you have some buttons and the focus lenses. So this is the mobile VR. It's mainly powered by the phone and the software on the phone. If you look at the graphics, this is the level of graphics you get with mobile VR. So it's sort of, you're going to see in a second, it's sort of low poly, low count of polygons, simplified, sort of 1999 computer level graphics, just because of the video cards we have in them. You know, they're limited, and you know, this is what we can do. So it works best for 360 videos or 360 pre-rendered experiences. So, for example, the thing I was showing here that you can later all try is a pre-rendered. I think you can put the lights down a bit. It's fine, yeah. It's a pre-rendered 360 video. So those artists created this world, 3D world. They rendered it into a video sphere, and that video sphere is being played back on a device. So you can look and turn your head, and you can look around and see different things, but you can't control where you're going. So it's sort of like a movie experience, except that it's 360. So this is what mobile VR is. And then desktop. This is more interesting territory. Once you get to the desktop level, you have three main headsets. So one of them, PlayStation, isn't really desktop, but it's still not mobile in the sense that you connect it to your PlayStation. They released it about a month ago. All you need is a PlayStation 4, you hook it up, and you can play games on it. So this is a very easy plug-and-play solution. It's very hard making software for it. There are no open source tools. You have to actually get the permission from Sony. So it's not something anyone can sit down and make. You have to be an established game studio. Talking about other two headsets, we have Oculus Rift, which is probably the thing you most heard about. That's the company that Facebook has bought for $2 billion about 3 years ago, I think. They have released a headset that is sort of a seated experience. You sit down, you put the headset on, you either have an Xbox controller or two hand touch controllers, and you can move your hands, you can look around, you can play, and you can lean in, and you can do things. But it's still surrounded around your chair, basically. It's like a swivel chair experience. And then the Htc Vive is the experience where you can actually walk around. So you have to put additional sensors in the corners of your room that shine lasers and create this laser grid inside of your room. But that allows you to jump in VR, it allows you to crouch, lay down, look around, do whatever you want, and you also have the hands. So in terms of the games and experiences, the seated games for the Oculus Rift or the PlayStation look something like this. They're mainly limited by the graphics card that you have. VR can only be driven by the best graphic cards in the market today. There are about 5. The new GTX line satisfies the requirements. The other cards don't. So be careful when you're buying a new PC for gaming. Check out that it supports VR, because it'll be a future proof for that. So, and again, the graphic is a little bit lower than what you usually see in computer games, but it manages to create that AAA sense of feeling. So it's much better than mobile. And then with the HTC Vive, you have a thing called room scale, as I was saying. You have something that works like this. You can, you have those sensors, and you can walk around in a certain space. And this is a great video of a girl playing fetch with a virtual dog. However sad or funny that would be. So this is a sort of a 3 times more intensive experience when you can actually do things with your arm. Like that game of the bows and arrows that you just saw, we used to play that in the office for scores, and if you play it hard enough, you can't play it the next day because your muscles hurt, because you've been moving your hands for 10 minutes straight without stopping. So it's interesting because it's bringing a lot of physical aspects of real life into VR. So, yeah. So now going back to making content for VR. As I showed you all these different platforms and ways to create content, there are basically 3 ways to create content for VR. So the first and the easiest one is to film 360 videos. And I think we just saw somebody here with a 360 camera walking around showing the, trying to film a 360 video. Usually those cameras have multiple lenses that capture a 360 video that can then be modified using a standard Adobe Premiere software or standard After Effects software. So anyone with video editing experience can actually do it. And you can use one of the pre-built apps for Samsung or for the Oculus to play that video. So that's the easiest way to create a content. You obviously need to think, where do you place the camera? So everything that's around the camera would be sensible. You know, if you can't hide as an operator behind the camera anymore, because the camera films all around you. So there are a lot of things to put in consideration. This kind of content works best for documentaries. For cinema and for movies where you have a plot, usually a director wants you to look at a particular spot in time. So when you're doing a 360 movie, you constantly have to try and guide the user to look at one side and remind them which side they have to look at. Because if he or she decides to face the other way, you know, your movie might not be showing its full potential. However, documentaries are great for this. So there are quite a few good examples. There's one documentary about Australian uranium miners. So they just go into the communities, place the camera there, and capture everything around the camera. So by filming content this way, you can really transport people and make them feel empathetic for others, show how people really feel and are. It's relatively inexpensive to create content this way. You can use a Samsung Gear VR camera that's about 350 euros. It's the price of a GoPro. You can buy more expensive ones. A cinema grade one would be about 20,000 euros. But again, that allows you to you know, film and produce content. The best example of this, I think, was the UN, United Nations, produced a film about refugees and people in Syria. And they actually reported 3 times the amount of donations after the standard viewing than they would get after just showing a movie. Because they do that every year. They produce like a cause, video for a cause, and they measure how many donations they get. So that's the first way to make content for VR. The second way is to do a 3D model something, and then render it into a 360 video again. But when you do a 3D model and you render things, you can not only make them 360, you can also make them 3D. So this is a little bit confusing, but in 3D cinema, you allow the cinema to separate things by depth. So you have to film 3D movies with 2 cameras. When you film a 360 movie, you film it with 1 camera. But if you want that 360 to be 3D, you need special lenses and special techniques, and you can do that. It's very complicated. It only works for the cinema-grade cameras. When we talk about rendering things and creating 3D content from 3D models, having virtual cameras that render out allows you to have that stereoscopic image. So you can give the scene more depth. It mostly works for close-up situations because after 10 meters, people can't distinguish the 3D effect. Everything, because of our eyes, everything just goes to the same focal length for us. So if you're making, let's say, a video VR experience where you're an ant and you see a lot of things close up and things change a lot, you can render that into a sphere, a stereoscopic sphere, and give the best experience possible. But all these ways are very limited in terms of just moving your head around. They're great because you can use that same content on YouTube and Facebook. You can put the same content up on the Facebook app and allow it to be viewed with people's phones. Or you can put it on YouTube and allow people to spin it around, even if they don't have the headsets. However, if you want to create real virtual reality experience, then you need to use something called a 3D engine. Has anyone used a 3D engine before, a game engine? Great. So a 3D engine or a game engine is just a program that allows you to create a game-like worlds. They're being rendered real time while you're using an app. So if you go to one place from another, it just re-renders everything. So when you play a computer game or a shooter game, it uses some sort of 3D engine to drive the world around you. For creating virtual reality experiences, there are 2 most popular 3D engines. One is called Unity, the other is called Unreal Engine 4. Unreal Engine 4 is mostly used by professional teams and people who have some experience with making games before. Unity is much easier to learn, it's much easier to start with, it has a much bigger community, but it's less professional in the sense that you can create less impressive graphics. We build most of our stuff with Unity, and 90% of virtual reality content is built with Unity. So if you want to pick it up from scratch and try doing something, I recommend going to Unity's website, getting a free 3D engine, because it's actually free, and then trying it out. There are plenty of great tutorials on YouTube allowing you to create simple apps for Google Cardboards that will work with any of your phones, and that allows you to place a cube somewhere, look around it, make it more complex, create additional things. But once you're ready to create full-on virtual reality experiences, I would probably recommend to getting one of the desktop headsets, like an Htc Vive or an Oculus Rift, and then still use the Unity to create a full-on immersive experiences. Just to give you full examples of the stuff we did, for example, we built a simulator for a Lithuanian energy company that allowed people to train. They usually do training like health and safety training, fireplace training, security training, and they answer test questions, which is of limited fun value. I mean, people are not really enjoying doing the test, and they usually just fly through them without paying the attention to the actual subject that is being taught. So we created a simulation in which you sit at the desk, at your desk where you control the electrical plant, and things happen around you. You know, there might be a fire, and then you get a questionnaire, the same kind of questionnaire, and you choose what to do, or your electrical plant might get hacked by Anonymous, and you still have to choose to do, well, what do you do next? So this takes something that they still have to do, a training, exercise, and just digitizes it, turns it into a VR experience that people remember. Because once you're put into a burning environment, you're much more likely to remember the fire safety rules being taught to you than when you're just doing a paper test. The other example that what we're doing with the mobile VR is we created this medical app for people who have this condition called Bppv. It's the most common neurological condition. Basically, you move your head around and your sense of spinning just continues. Like you feel like you're constantly spinning. And that can be fixed by moving ahead in a certain pattern for 20 minutes. There is an exercise that's being used for 30 years. We didn't invent that. But the problem is it's quite complex to remember. And there are 6 different exercises depending on which canal got the problem. And doctors don't usually have time, or they don't remember which exercise they have to do. So people end up being hospitalized for days just because somebody doesn't remember the exercise. So we made a virtual reality app that allows people to be guided by the headset, where they have to turn their head, how long they have to pause there, what do they have to do to recalibrate their head. And something like this is relatively simple to make, and it solves a problem that's a huge problem in medicine. And you know, in terms of like development time, it doesn't take that much time. So you know, you can create powerful content that's quite interesting in matters of weeks or days. All you need to do is open up YouTube, get a Google Cardboard for starts, and start developing it. So I guess at this point, I want to have questions from you, and then we can go deeper into the limitations. How much time do I got?
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes, good. Yep. So do you have any questions before I go further?
We'll give you a microphone.
Yep.
I still have a question, but I'm not sure.
Sure, yeah. No, that's fine.
Okay, I just want to know, what is the difference between VR and AR?
Yeah, okay.
And
That's a good question, yeah.
follow-up question to that. And isn't AR the future? And isn't VR a stepping stone to AR?
So the question was, what's the difference between AR and VR? And isn't VR like a stepping stone towards AR? So I think there are certain applications that are better in virtual reality, where you're being presented a new environment around you. And there are certain applications, and there are more of them, which would be better in augmented reality, which is AR, which is reality where you take the real reality and put fake stuff on top of it, like menus and cubes. The thing is that today we can't do AR because of the technical inabilities of our age. We will be able to do great AR in maybe 10 or 15 years. And VR is a stepping stone towards that. And I think in the future, we're maybe going to have a different term for this whole thing. We're not going to call it neither of those two names. And this is just going to be a switch between turning the outside world in or off out of the headset. So it's probably going to blend into one thing. In terms of the future, I think for the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see the first developments in the AR while VR will mature, and then they'll sort of join together in the future. Yeah, any other questions? Okay.
Does anybody else want to try the headset?
Yeah, and actually you can just catch me after this and try it in the lobby. I'll have it until the battery dies and then recharge it and we can go again. So in terms of further stuff, when designing for VR, user experience is quite different. If you're used to designing user experience for mobile or phones, when you try and do VR apps, you have to think about a whole bunch of other things. It's kind of like joining interior design, product design, and app design into one. First of all, because you're creating an environment, you have to think about how the environment looks and what functions those things serve. Like we have a thing like a chair in reality because it does, it stops us from standing. But in virtual reality, a chair serves absolutely no purpose unless you are sitting on it. So you have to rethink every object around you. And if you're making tools and putting yourself in the room, you have to ask yourself, do I have to recreate everything in that room? Or is it just a decoration? The other thing is there are a certain way we interact with things. So on a mobile, we press the screen, we get some feedback. In virtual reality, you can press virtual screens, but how do you get users the feedback that they're actually touching something? With the HTC Vive, you can put the vibration at different frequencies and give them a sense of how strongly they're touching something. But on other controllers, how do you focus people on the task they're doing and make them believe that they're actually touching something? That's an interesting question in the UX. And the other thing is that a lot of people, when they think about VR, they think about this, futuristic movie stuff interface where you move things around like in the Iron Man or, and that looks great in the cinema, but it's not great to be using VR in that way. Nobody wants to be waving their hands around all the time because it's tiresome. So you have to think if things are really necessary. Is making things translucent really necessary? Is putting objects here where it's hard to reach for the user really necessary? What if the user is shorter? So for example, short and tall people have different heights in reality, so they do in virtual reality. So if somebody is short, he might not be able to reach that element in VR. So you actually have to test your app with all these different scenarios and give them to all these different diverse groups of people to actually see what's working and what's not. So there's a great talk by a guy called Mike Alger about UX in VR. And after he did that, he actually got hired by Google, so he works on that in Google now. So I recommend watching that if somebody's interested. And the last point I had was the constraints. The virtual reality devices today put us into certain constrained spaces. Like we can allow people to touch things, but we can't show them texture. We can put the text somewhere, but the screen resolutions aren't great enough yet, so we can put it everywhere because it won't be readable. So you have to think about a lot of these things when designing VR apps. You have to think, how much text can I put? Do I have to tell the user how to use something without the text? How do I make it comfortable? The other constraint is actually time you spend using the VR headset. It's great, but it's tiresome because you're usually standing up and you're doing an activity. So it feels like after 2 hours in VR, you just want to sit down as you would want after 2 hours of walking. So things like that don't come into consideration where it's typing away on our office chairs. But if you're using a headset standing up, how do you shape the experience so the user gets most of the things done in that period of time? So all these constraints are things to think about when designing for virtual reality. And I mean, if you have any questions ever, feel free to contact me, email me on LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. And now I guess that was my last point, and I want to do the question session, and then we can, yeah. Yeah.
The medical intervention we spoke about, as opposed to being constrained, sounds brilliant and really scalable. Have you guys started to look at how you can make that available widely? Arthroscopy, across
So-
forever you've built it. So,
So if I understand correctly, you mean medical intervention,
the one that you spoke about around helping people recalibrate their
the head?
head.
Yeah. So to talk more about that problem, it's that problem appears because in your inner ear you have two things. You have canals, which show you the acceleration, and you have the other part, which is kind of like a gyroscope, which shows you the position. And that other part works by having calcium crystals touch your walls of your inner ear. And if any of them gets disconnected and fall into your canals, then that's when you get that problem. So when you're recalibrating your head, when you're turning it around, all you're doing is trying to get that crystal out of there. So it's an interesting physical problem. It's like that game where you're trying to get the little thingy out of the labyrinth, except it's in your head and makes you want to throw up. So
Can we have maybe
Yeah.
one